everyone. Ready for a deep dive into a topic you guys specifically requested?
Let's do it.
All right, so we're talking unmarried women in Saudi Arabia. It's definitely been generating some buzz lately.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of opinions flying around.
Exactly. And we've got a ton of different sources to work with today. Government reports, we've got articles from Saudi and international news, a little bit of academic stuff, and of course, gotta see what people are saying on social media.
Always got to check social media.
Right. Always. So basically, we're going to explore how all these cultural and economic factors are, interacting with personal choices.
It's complex, for sure.
Super complex. Maybe we'll even challenge some of our own assumptions about marriage and singlehood along the way.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I think that's the best part of these deep dives. Always learning something new.
Totally agree. Okay, so to really kick things off, I think we got to address that statistic that's been making the rounds. The one from Al-Watan.
Oh, yeah, the 41%.
41%, yeah. 41% of Saudi women aged 15 to 49 have never been married. When I first saw that number, I was like, whoa.
It's definitely a big number. But remember, that age range is pretty wide.
That's true.
So it includes, younger women who might get married later and those who might choose to stay single. The more interesting question, in my opinion, is the why.
Yeah, the why is always more interesting. Okay, so what about the why? I've been seeing a ton of chatter on social media, especially on Threads and X, and honestly, it's a mixed bag.
What are people saying?
Well, some are worried about, where Saudi men are going to find wives, if not in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Others are suggesting, get this, that foreigners should be allowed to marry Saudi women to, fix the imbalance or whatever.
Interesting. Almost as if this one statistic has become a way to project all these societal anxieties,
Oh, absolutely. It's totally about assumptions, right? Assumptions about marriage and gender roles and, even national identity.
It's all connected, and it's fascinating to see how it plays out.
Totally. But okay, let's get real for a second. Is this really about choice? Because that word that keeps coming up, spinster, or the Arabic equivalent, anis.
Yeah, anis.
It's not exactly a compliment, is it? It feels like society is trying to, pressure women into marriage by labeling them this way.
Well, it definitely carries some negative baggage. And, Saudi journalist Maha Al-Hujalan actually wrote about this in Al-Watan back in 2006.
What did she say?
She basically said she hates the term. She thinks it reduces a woman to just her marital status.
Yeah.
It ignores everything else about her as an individual.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It doesn't take into account her personality, her accomplishments, anything.
Exactly.
So, okay, the word itself is problematic.
Yeah.
What are the real factors behind more women staying single in Saudi Arabia?
Okay, so one thing that's been happening is that Saudi women are getting more education than ever before.
Right, more degrees.
Way more.
Yeah.
An article in The Independent from 2015 actually talked about this. And with more education, there's often a desire for, more.
More options.
Yeah, exactly. Fulfilling careers. They want to go beyond those traditional roles.
Right. I'm seeing a similar sentiment in the comment sections, too. So many women are saying they want more control over their own marriage choices.
Which makes sense. They're looking for partners who respect them, see them as equals.
Right. It's not just about finding a husband anymore. It's about finding a partner who, gets them, shares their values and ambitions.
Yeah, a true partnership. It's pretty basic.
Silly. Okay, but what about the economic side of things?
Oh, right.
I'm seeing a lot of talk about dowries and wedding expenses.
And just the overall cost of living.
Exactly. It's expensive to get married. Could this be a major factor in delaying marriage or even preventing it altogether?
I mean, it definitely plays a role. There was a family consultant, Dr. Mohammed Basha. He was quoted in Arab News in 2016. And he basically said that those high dowries, plus those extravagant weddings, they're a huge financial strain, especially for young men.
Yeah, I could see that.
And on top of that, the cost of living in general is pretty high. So a lot of young men are struggling to get to that point of financial stability where, society traditionally says they're ready for marriage.
Makes sense. But are we saying that every single woman in Saudi Arabia is, only focused on finding a rich husband?
No, not at all. Like we said, Saudi Arabia isn't a monolith. There's diversity of thought.
Right, of course.
And that's what makes this so interesting, right? So, for example, there was this woman, Amna Fatani. She was studying in the U.S., and she was also featured in that Independent article. She was really clear that she wanted a partner who respects her ambitions above all else.
Wow. So for her, financial security wasn't the top priority.
Exactly. It was about finding someone who supported her goals, her career aspirations, and I think that speaks volumes about what a lot of women want.
Totally. It challenges those assumptions we were talking about earlier, And actually, speaking of challenging assumptions, there's this phrase I keep seeing, spinster revolution. It was in an article from 2019 in the New Arab. What do you make of that?
Well, it's a bit provocative, for sure. But I think it captures this idea that this isn't just a passive trend. It's women actively pushing back against what's expected of them.
It's like they're saying, I'm going to define success on my own terms. Thank you very much.
Exactly. They're not waiting for permission to live their lives.
I love that. Okay, I think we need to pause here for a second and let everyone catch their breath.
It's been a whirlwind.
Right. We've covered a lot, but there's even more to come.
So to understand this whole spinster revolution thing a little better, I think we need to look at, the bigger picture in Saudi Arabia, the historical context and the legal stuff. That's where this academic journal article comes in.
Okay, bring on the scholarly insights. Hopefully this one isn't too, jargon-filled. Sometimes those journal articles are a bit much.
Don't worry, this one is actually pretty interesting. What I found most fascinating was how much religion, laws, and social customs are all intertwined in Saudi Arabia. The article really emphasized how the whole legal system is based on Islamic law, or Sharia, which has a big influence on family law and gender roles.
So that's why male guardianship keeps popping up everywhere. It's not just a cultural thing. It's literally written into the legal system.
Exactly. Under Saudi law, women are basically considered legal minors. They need permission from a male guardian for, well, pretty much everything. Traveling abroad, getting married, even some healthcare stuff. It's usually their father or husband, maybe a brother.
Wow, can you imagine having to ask permission just to, travel for work or even go to school? That would be so frustrating.
Frustrating is an understatement. The article highlighted how these guardianship laws can be huge roadblocks, even for women who are, highly educated and successful.
It makes you think, right? Remember that 41% statistic? Could this legal system actually be a factor in why some women choose to stay single?
It's a valid question. Does it limit their economic independence and therefore impact their marriage prospects? Yeah. It's definitely worth considering.
Totally. It seems kind of backwards, doesn't it? On the one hand, Saudi Arabia is encouraging women to get educated and join the workforce, but then they're still under these super restrictive laws. No wonder there's so much debate about women's rights there.
Yeah, it's a super complex situation that's constantly changing, too. The article did mention some recent reforms, though, that are aimed at, improving things for women.
Okay, well, that's good, at least.
Like in 2002, women were finally allowed to get their own ID cards. Before that, they were just listed on their guardian's card.
Oh, wow. Seriously, they didn't even exist as individuals in the eyes of the law.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so at least that's a step forward. But I'm also seeing a lot of people online who are, well, skeptical.
Skeptical
Of the reforms. Are they really making a difference? Are they being implemented properly? Is it all happening way too slowly? Those kinds of questions.
Those are fair questions, for sure. It takes time for big changes to happen, especially when you're talking about really deep-rooted social and legal structures. I mean, there have been some positive developments, like they've created special family courts, and more women are studying law now, but it's a long road ahead.
Yeah, it's that whole push and pull between, progress and tradition. It's got to be hard to find that balance. Yeah. But even with all the challenges, it's clear that Saudi women aren't just sitting back and accepting things. They're speaking up, demanding more. And it's making me wonder if maybe this whole trend of women delaying marriage or choosing not to marry at all could actually be empowering in a way.
I think it absolutely could be. They're taking control. It's like they're saying, my worth isn't tied to my marital status.
Exactly. It's about defining success on their own terms. So powerful.
And it's a message that resonates with women all over the world.
So true. Okay, but let's get real about something. Being able to make choices about, marriage and family, well, it's often tied to economic independence, right? Can you actually be independent as a woman in Saudi Arabia?
That's the thing. You have these cultural norms, then you have these economic pressures, and then individual hopes and dreams on top of that. It all gets very, very tangled.
So tangled. Because even though more Saudi women are getting educated and working, they're still hitting some serious roadblocks when it comes to, actual economic equality.
Oh, yeah, big time. We're talking wage gaps, limited job opportunities, and this whole expectation that a woman's place is in the home, even if she's working full-time.
It's almost like they're being told, you can work, but don't forget your primary role is still wife and mother.
Right, and that double standard can be really tough to navigate.
Totally. So let's break down some of these economic realities.
Okay, so first off, the employment rate gap between men and women is huge.
Yeah.
Back in 2005, a report from the Saudi Ministry of Economy and Planning showed that women only made up 5.4% of the workforce.
5.4%. That's like nothing.
I know, right?
Even the World Bank reported something similar in 2007, saying only 14% of women were actually working or actively looking for work.
It's crazy low.
Yeah.
There's so much potential there, both for women and for the whole Saudi economy.
Absolutely. So what's holding them back? Is it just the guardianship laws?
Well, partly the laws, but it's also just the cultural stuff,
Yeah.
like the social expectations. Sometimes it's hard for women to access certain jobs because of those expectations. And then you have things like the cost of childcare, not having flexible work options, and the stigma that comes with women working outside the home.
That stigma. It's like no matter what you do, you can't win.
I know. It's so frustrating.
Okay, so it's like a giant web of obstacles.
Yeah.
It seems like to make real change, you'd need a whole bunch of different solutions happening at the same time. You need legal reforms, but you also need to, change people's minds, get rid of those gender stereotypes and create an environment where women actually feel supported.
You got it. It's not enough to just change the laws. You have to change the whole mindset. A society where women's contributions are valued, where their dreams matter.
Yes, exactly. Okay, but even with all these challenges, are there any, signs of hope? Are there areas where women are breaking through?
Oh, for sure. Higher education's a great example. A report from way back in 2004 found that women actually earned a whopping 79% of all the PhD degrees awarded in Saudi Arabia that year.
79%. That's amazing. So it seems like they're definitely killing it in the education department.
Yeah. And hopefully that means they'll be able to, break down those barriers in other areas too.
Fingers crossed. Okay, what about the government? Are they doing anything specific to, help women economically?
Well, they have been trying to increase women's employment. It's part of their big national development plans.
Sounds promising.
And they have initiatives to help women who want to start their own businesses. Things like the Khadija bint Kuwailid Center for Business Women.
Oh, that sounds cool, but I'm sensing a but coming.
Well, the tricky part is making sure those initiatives actually lead to, real change. Sometimes there's a gap between what they say they're going to do and what actually happens on the ground.
The classic say one thing, do another situation.
Right. And then there's the question of whether they're getting to the root of the problem, or are they just focusing on the surface stuff without actually addressing the power imbalances?
Totally. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Exactly. You got to fix the bone, not just cover up the wound.
Love that analogy. So, big takeaway here. Real progress takes a whole system approach. Laws, opportunities, A&D, a change in how people think.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's about creating a society where women have the freedom to choose their own path, to go after their dreams, and to know that their voices matter.
100%.
And that brings us to something super interesting that we keep seeing in our research, the role of social media.
Oh, yeah. Social media is a whole other layer to this story.
It's crazy, right? Because Saudi Arabia can be pretty conservative, right? But even with those restrictions on free speech and all that, social media has become this space where women can share their experiences and connect with others who get it.
It's like this virtual world where they can kind of bypass those traditional barriers, and just talk.
And we're seeing that in our research. The range of opinions is incredible.
It really is. Students, professionals, activists, mothers, daughters, they're all chiming in on everything from marriage and family to work and education.
It's giving us this insider's view, a glimpse into the real lives of Saudi women.
Exactly. And that's so valuable, for people outside of Saudi Arabia who are trying to understand what it's really like there.
And it's got to be empowering for the women themselves, too, right? To connect with each other and see that they're not alone.
Oh, absolutely. They're finding support, building communities, and advocating for change.
So even in places where there are limits on what you can say, there's still this hunger to be heard. Social media is like this tool to amplify those voices and get those conversations started.
Nicely put. It's like we're peeking behind the curtain and seeing a side of Saudi Arabia that we might not have seen otherwise. And those nuances, those struggles, that resilience is also important for understanding what's really going on.
It's about seeing the whole picture, not just the stereotypes. Which brings us to another really important aspect of this whole discussion, the emotional side of it all.
Oh, yeah. This is where it gets really real.
It's not just stats and laws. We're talking about real people with real feelings, and they're being impacted by this stuff in a very real way.
Absolutely. And we can't forget that all this societal pressure can have a real impact on mental health. Think about it. Women are constantly being told what they should be doing, how they should live their lives. That can be incredibly damaging.
Yeah, no kidding. And I'm seeing that in the comment sections too. Women are talking about their anxiety, their self-doubt, the fear of being judged if they don't fit in.
It's heartbreaking. And I can only imagine how much more intense it is in a place like Saudi Arabia, where religion, culture, and family expectations are all so intertwined.
Right. It takes serious courage to even speak out online. They're risking a lot just to be honest about how they feel.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important for women to have safe spaces where they can be themselves, where they can talk about their struggles without fear of judgment.
So important, because at the end of the day, this isn't just an intellectual debate. It's about people. It's about their well-being and their right to live a life that feels authentic and true to them.
And that's a message that speaks to everyone, everywhere. Every society has its own pressures and expectations.
It's up to all of us to challenge those norms and support each other, to create a world where everyone feels valued no matter what.
Well said.
Okay, so I think we're ready to move into the final part of our deep dive. We've talked about all the complexities of women's lives in Saudi Arabia, the barriers they face, the social pressures. But now I think it's time to look ahead, to the future. It's easy to get lost in the numbers and all the legal stuff, but hearing those stories from real women, well, that's what really makes you think.
Yeah, those personal stories make it so much more relatable.
For sure. It reminds us that this is about real people, you know? People making tough decisions. It's not just some abstract concept.
It's about real lives, real emotions.
Okay, so thinking about everything we've learned, what do you think? What does the future hold for women in Saudi Arabia? Is there room for, optimism? Or is it all just too complicated?
That's the big question. I mean, there will definitely be challenges along the way, no doubt about that. But I don't know, there's something in the air, like a real sense of things changing. I wouldn't say it's naive optimism, but definitely a sense of hope. Like that feeling of, we're going to make this happen,
I love that we're going to make this happen attitude. It's so much better than just waiting around, hoping for the best. And it seems like a lot of that energy is coming from all this activism. Women speaking up and demanding change, both inside Saudi Arabia and all over the world.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. They're not just waiting around anymore. They're organizing. They're pushing for real change.
And they're doing it on so many different levels, too, like online activism, using social media to raise awareness. And then you've got women working within the system, trying to change the laws and policies.
It's a really smart strategy. It's about applying pressure from all sides. You've got those grassroots movements, the legal stuff, and then changing how the public thinks.
And they're making some real progress.
Okay.
We read about women running for office, women starting businesses, women challenging those old ways of doing things.
And it's not just happening in Saudi Arabia either. These women are connecting with people all over the world. International organizations, the media, all that.
It's like they're building this global network, amplifying their voices and making sure that everyone is paying attention.
And that global attention puts pressure on the Saudi government, too. It forces them to listen, to actually implement those reforms and live up to their promises.
Exactly. When the world is watching, you got to step up, right? But it's not enough to just change the laws. You have to change how people think.
Right. The laws are just the beginning. Real change has to come from within,
Okay, so how do we change those deeply ingrained beliefs about gender and all that?
Well, I think education is a big part of it. Teaching kids about gender equality and respect. Teaching them that women's contributions are valuable.
Yeah, got to start them young.
Exactly. But it's not just about school either. Families, communities, even the media. They all play a role in shaping how we see the world.
That's so true. Think about it, everyone. What messages did you hear growing up about what it means to be a man or a woman? Did those messages help or hurt? Did they make you think differently about things? It's something we all got to think about.
We all have those ingrained beliefs. We might not even realize it. But imagine a world where girls grow up believing that they can do anything, that their dreams are just as important as anyone else's, that their voices deserve to be heard.
That's what so many women in Saudi Arabia are fighting for. They're creating a better future for their daughters, for their granddaughters. They want them to have the opportunities that maybe they didn't have.
They're creating a legacy of hope. They're showing us that change is possible, even when things seem impossible.
Okay, so after all of that, I think it's time to bring it back to you guys, the listeners. What does all this mean for you?
Because this isn't just a story about Saudi Arabia. This is a conversation about gender equality everywhere. It's about how we treat each other. It's about the kind of world we want to live in.
So we're challenging you all. Take a look at your own assumptions. What do you believe about men and women? How do those beliefs affect your actions, your decisions, even just the way you see things?
Think about it. What can you do even in a small way, to make things more fair and equal in your own life?
Because even the smallest actions can make a difference. You never know who you might inspire.
And as we've learned from these amazing women in Saudi Arabia, change, I guess, possible. When people come together, when they raise their voices, they can make incredible things happen.
So true. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. It's been an amazing journey, and hopefully we've sparked some new ideas, some new conversations. Keep exploring these important issues. It matters.